Let's just test it. See, the last one was Jane. Now we're gonna do Amanda. Working fine. Okay, in this video I'm gonna try to give you some idea what you need as a base knowledge to create a web app with app scripts. And I could create the script from Google Sheets, but I'm gonna keep this separate because I'm gonna think about this as a web app. I'm in my Google Drive in a folder, so I'm gonna right click someplace and go under more and go under connect more apps. Here I'm going to search apps script. I'm gonna get the one from Google, obviously. Close this. So now after I did this, I should be able to right click, and when I go under more, I should have Google App Script. Great. So I'm gonna create a new app script. I'm gonna name this, I'll call this basic web app. Hit OK. And web app is basically something that's gonna give you a web interface, like a web page kind of interface where people can go and interact with it, and you will be able to link it to different Google services like Google Sheets or really anything else from Google. To make a web app, basically what you have to create is a function with the name doGet. To make this work, this function has to return either text or it can return HTML. So to do HTML, you'll do HTML service dot, and we can create HTML output in many different ways. What I'm going to do, I'm going to use create HTML output from file. And then it's going to ask for the file name. So I'm going to call this page, I guess. So that's pretty much all I'm going to do now. Because I'm creating this from a file that's called a page, I have to create that file. So I'm going to go under file and go under new, and it's going to be an HTML file. And it should be called whatever I called it over there. So I used page, and I'm going to use page for the name. And this is our base HTML structure. I'm not going to be explaining HTML in this video. So if anybody wants me to do some HTML videos, let me know. I'll do them separately. But for this, I'm not going to talk about HTML. So in here, let's just start by doing something very basic. I'm going to do an HTML heading. So, and we'll just say hello, save it. So here's my HTML file. It's called page. And in my script, in my doGet function, I'm doing this HTML service, and I'm creating HTML output from that file called page, which is right here. So if I save this, now to get this to work, I will have to publish this as a web app. So I'm going to go under publish and see there is deploy as web app. I'm going to choose that. Here we're going to give it a version, so you can now describe what it is. I'm just going to leave it blank. How you want this executed, so it's going to be executed as me, and who should have access to this. Now, since I'm developing this right now, it's just going to be myself. Now, if you're creating this for other people to have access to, obviously you would choose one of the other options, right? If you want for everybody to have access to it, that would be the last one. And I'm going to go only myself, and I'm going to do deploy. So what it's going to do is going to give me this URL. So if I copy that URL, see what it's going to give me is basically that HTML, which is hello. And on top, it always gives this warning from Google, which is something I think they started last year. So basically it warns people that this is not Google's content, although it's sitting on google.com property. Anyhow, so this is how we can actually create an HTML and basically just render it as a result. Getting back to our script, I'm gonna hit OK. I'll go over something here in just a little bit. So doGet is basically when somebody loads the page, what do you want rendered? And that's gonna be on our page HTML site. Now, the part that I really want to concentrate here is how can I interact with the user so that I can do something here in the user interface and somehow send that information to my app script and do something with it. One thing I want to show you first of all is if I just pass a parameter here, usually I'll call it E. People will call this event or something. I call it E, keep it short, just one letter. And the reason I'm doing this, I just want to show you what's in there. So if I do log that E, and what I need to do now, I need to deploy this again. So when you do any changes to this, whatever is loading here, it's still the old version of our script. So you need to redeploy this to get the new version of your script. Now, then you're going to go publish and deploy as web app. Now, one thing you want to make sure when you do this, you want to make sure you don't do the same version. So if you keep it the same version as version 1, it's just not going to save the new version. It's still going to be the old version. So if you want the new version deployed now, you're going to go new as the new version, and you're going to update this. Now it's going to give you this link again. So we're going to open that. And here you go. It's still the same hello, but the difference now is going to be this. If I go back, we're logging this. I look at this, see there's this log, and you can see the time and everything that this logged at. So if you pay attention here, we are basically 0:41:02. Now, if I go back and just refresh this and go back here, see, it's 0:41 now 30. So every time the page renders, it's going to run that same doGet function, which means we're going to have access to these parameters. If you look at this right now, there's really not much in here. So you could pass parameters to a page like you would do in a web page. So if you're passing get parameters on a web page, if this is our URL for our web page, we would have just done like a question mark here, right? And then we could do name equals Joe, something like that, hit enter. So now I should be passing a parameter name with the value Joe to this. Now let's go back and look at this. If you look here, see, there it is. Now we're getting that parameter in here in our script. And obviously, if you wanted to do something, we could do something with that. If you have multiple parameters here, usually in the URL, they are separated with the ampersand, right? So it's ampersand. So the name is Joe, and I'll do age equals 34 or something. So I hit enter. Now, if I go back and look at this log, see, it's going to pass 2 of those parameters. The last thing I want to mention here before I move on. So you see, basically we're getting a JSON object, and one of those values is parameter, and there is also parameters. Now, if you look at these two, this one gets us the parameters in an array instead of giving one value. And the reason that this might be necessary is when you're passing multiple parameters. So for example, let's say the parameter we are going to pass is going to be category, and I'm going to give it several values. So you give it several values in your URL by separating it by a comma. So if I do 6,44,2, I hit enter. Now I gave this category property 3 different values. So if we go back and look at our log, and again, I'm going to do with Command Enter or Control Enter here. So you'll see how this basically parameters gives us an array of those 3 values. Now, before I get to the user interaction, you remember how I said that if you're changing anything on the script, you will have to publish it. So if you deploy it as a web app, now you have to give it a different version, which will be crazy if you're going to be doing a lot of development. Now you have to create a new version every single time. Now you don't need to do this. You don't need to do a version unless it's a version you're deploying. So what you need to do really to just see the latest changes, when you go to this publish, you just go under deploy as web app and you do test web app for your latest code. Just click on this latest code link and it will open that development version, which is DEV in the end. So now every time we make a change here, we don't really have to run an update. We can just see what happens. So for example, if I just log param here, I'm gonna save and I'll just refresh this development version of this. And if I go back and look at my log, oh, undefined. I think that's parameter, not param. So let's refresh this again. Name equals Anna or something. I go back here, I look, there's that. So I'm going to get that value. So now we don't have to redeploy every time. We can just basically just refresh this and we're going to see the results. So now let's try to interact from here to our script. So what I want to do, I want to add a button on here and I want to be able to click on that button and I want that button to run some function in my app script. So to do that, I'm going to go to my HTML and I'm going to create the button, right? So I'll do button and button again, closing, oops, there it is. And we're going to give this button some text. I'm going to call it run it. So if I save this, I go back and reload this, we should see that now button in here, which is our HTML button. Now I'm going to go back here and give this button an ID. I'm going to give it ID as BTN. That's the ID. So we're going to use that ID to interact with this button in JavaScript in here. So then I'm going to go here and create a script tag. And if you're not familiar with HTML, you have to create the script tags in HTML, and whatever goes inside of this is JavaScript. And again, if you don't understand HTML at all, I would really recommend to brush up on HTML a little bit before you watch this. Now we are in JavaScript in the script. So what I want to do in this JavaScript, I want to create an event listener. When somebody clicks on this button, I want something to happen. So to do this, I'm going to first grab that element by using document object. So I'll do document dot, and we're going to use this method get element by ID, and the ID is text, and that's going to be this BTN. That's the ID. So that's going to grab us that element, and we're going to go ahead and add an event listener. That's going to be a function, and that function has 2 arguments. The first argument is the type of event we're listening for. So I want the click event. That's when somebody clicks on this button, and I want to run a function when somebody clicks on this. Now that function is not going to be the app scripts function. So that function is going to be the function that you're going to have to create in your web page in here. So for now, I'm going to call this function DoStuff. Sorry for this very creative name, but it won't matter. So we're gonna do function and create that DoStuff function, because otherwise, well, there's no DoStuff function. So basically what we're saying here, when somebody clicks on this button, run this function called DoStuff, and that function is going to be this JavaScript function right here. Now what we want that function to do, we want this function to run a function in our app scripts, which is going to be, well, where is it? Here in our code. Now, keep in mind that this part of the code is not visible for the user. This is like a server-side code. You can think about this. Now, whatever you put in the page HTML, this is public. So anybody can just right-click and view page source and look at the content of this code. We don't want to have anything that's important or shouldn't be visible to the public in here in this code. We want all the good stuff to be happening here. Now here I'm going to have this function, and what this function is going to do, it's going to run a function over here. Now let's first of all create a function that we're planning to run. So the function I'm gonna do user clicked. Doesn't matter what you call it, this is just the name for your function. I'm just gonna go with this just because I couldn't think of anything better. And I'm for now going to just log someone clicked the button. Okay, so that's it. That's all this function is going to do, just log that result. So if we are able to successfully run that, we should be able to come here and look at a log and see that it says someone clicked the button. Now I could obviously run it from here. I could just do user clicked and run this and then look for this here, but we want to get this result not from here, but from our user clicking on the button. I'm just gonna refresh this so that log cleared, so you can see this empty again, so that we can see how we do this with the button. Now the function is, remember, user clicked. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go back here, here, and we're going to, in this function, do this. We're gonna go Google run script, and this is a special function that you can place in this part of your HTML page to be able to run things from here. So and we're gonna do Google run script, and we're gonna run the function. So our function is called user clicked. So I'm gonna do user clicked. So I'm gonna save this, and now let's try to first of all look at our log. Nothing in here. Now we're gonna go back here first, refresh this, and I'm gonna click run it. So let's go back and take a look at our log, and nothing. And that's because, why is that? Oh, that's because it's not run script, it's script run. Okay, sorry about that. There should be script run. So save this. I'm gonna go back and refresh this thing, and we're gonna click on run it again. Let's go back and check it out. Look at our log. There it is. Someone clicked the button. Let's just wait for a second. It's 55:22 right here. Let me go here and click again. And it's 55:37. So this is how we can make something run in our app script code from our HTML site. Now, why is this interesting? Well, you could have your user enter some information and have them run it, and then take that information and do something with it, right? So let's first of all create our HTML input element. That's going to be type equals text. And we're going to give this some sort of ID. I'm going to call this one name, username. Let's just go here and type some text. Usually this should go under a label. Again, not HTML tutorial. So this label is just a text that's going to show up in front of our input right now. So if I save this and refresh, see, now there is this box for somebody to type something in, and then there's this button to click on. So what we want to be able to do, we want to be able to grab this text that was entered in here and hopefully send it to our app script. I'm going to close this because it's going to keep coming up. We're going to send that to here, to our script, which could do some other things. For example, we could save it to like a Google Sheet or something like that. So let's see how we would do something like that. So first of all, to do that, we had to have this ID for our input because, well, we're going to grab that information using that ID, and not really so much the information, but we're going to grab the input element itself. So that means when we run this and we run this function, what we want this function to do, we want this function first, before it runs this user clicked thing, we want this function to be able to grab what's in here. So to do that, we're gonna again use this document get element by ID thing, and the ID this time is username. We're gonna grab the username ID element, which is going to be this input box, and we want whatever user types in it, which we can get by using .value property for this. So that should be whatever somebody typed in this box. Now we can take that and save it in a variable. We're going to call it variable uname for username, I guess. And at this point, when we click on this button, it's going to run this function. This function is going to trigger this, which is going to grab what's entered in that particular box. And now we want to take that information and send it to our script. So we're going to grab that uname variable and we're going to pass it right in this function user clicked. Great. So now that we have that, we have to do something with this variable in our script, right? So we're going to go back to our code. Now this is going to be that user clicked function, which we didn't say it should be accepting any arguments. Now we will. We'll say we should be accepting a name argument, and then we can use it in our function. We can say, instead of someone clicked the button, we can say name plus, which name would be if somebody types Joe, it will be Joe clicked the button now. So we're going to add this together. I'm going to save this. So let's go back and refresh. And now let's test this out. So I'm going to go here under name and I'm going to call this Linda. Run it. So if we go back here, if we look at our log, see it says Linda clicked the button because now we're grabbing the information and sending to our script. So if we go here and change it to like Joe, click run it. If we go back, we'll look at this. It's going to be Joe clicked the button. Now it's really annoying that when we type the name, we click run it, the name stays in here. It doesn't really matter, but just because I want to clean that up, I'm just gonna take that value after we grab it and send it to our script and just clear it by sending an empty string. I'm setting that box to be empty after we enter it. I'm gonna save this. If I go back now, refresh, and I type I don't know, Anna, I'm gonna click run it. See, it clears the box after it's done, but we should still get Anna clicked the button. So now we should be able to grab this and save it to some sort of spreadsheet. So I have this spreadsheet already. It's a blank, brand new spreadsheet. So now I just have to be able to save information to this spreadsheet. So I'm going to add that name here. So to do that, we're going to need the ID of the spreadsheet or the URL, one of the other. I'm just used to using IDs. You can also use the URL if you want. The ID, see after the day slash. You know what? I'm just going to use the URL this time to not go over this all over again. Why and which one is the ID? I'm going to copy the whole URL. I'm going to go back here and not here, here. So in our script, we're going to first get our spreadsheet to a variable, right? So we're going to go var ss, that's our spreadsheet, and we need to do our spreadsheet app. So if you're familiar with my Google Sheets app scripts tutorials, you should know this very well at this point. Spreadsheet app. So what we're going to do, we're going to use this get, and not get, but open by URL. I could just put the URL here, but what I'm going to do, I'm just going to create a variable. Just going to say var URL equals, and I'm going to put that URL that I copied in here. And we need to do a semicolon to end this line. And then we'll pass that URL here to open this by URL. That's going to open our spreadsheet right here to an SS variable. Then we're going to get the sheet where we want to save it. It's called sheet 1. I'm going to rename this, make this nicer. I'm going to call it data. Right. So let's grab that tab, create var ws for worksheet, and we'll do ss dot get sheet by name, and the name was data. So that should get that sheet. And what we need to do, we need to save some info to that, and we'll do ws, that's our worksheet, and we're going to add, is it insert? Probably insert row, I assume. No, that's not it. So let's do the append row. There it is, append row. Sorry, I keep forgetting these names. That's what happens when you're on a different coding platform every single day. Anyways, so the row content should be a one-dimensional array, which is the whole, basically, columns. Every column is one element in this array. So for me, I just have one element, but it still has to be an array. So it's going to be this array, and it's just going to have the name in that. Now, just to have something else, I guess I'm just going to do, let's just do the name first, and we'll add something else in a second. So I'm going to save this, comment this logout at this point. Now, first of all, we need to make sure we give access to this spreadsheet so it can actually run this. So I'm going to just run it from this side. It's going to ask for permissions. I'm going to give permissions to this. Here we go. Advanced. Here, allow. Here we go. So I gave permission to access the spreadsheet. See, it's undefined because I was basically not passing anything to that function. I'm going to clear that. So now we have a blank worksheet. So at this point, I'm going to go back here and refresh and try to add a name. So I'll add Anna, run it. So let's go back to our file. There it is. Now we have Anna. Now I'm going to go here and do Joe, run it. Go back here. There's another record. Here we do Olivia, run it. And here we go. Now, if we wanted to add maybe the date, so I'm going to do a second column. Now, you could have a second column as another input box that somebody's adding here and get it and send it. But I'll probably go over it in a different video. I'm just going to try to keep this as short as possible, I guess. So as a second one, I'm just going to pass the date that it was entered. So I'm just going to say new date, which should create a date object with the current date. So I'm going to save this. So at this point, now if I go back and add Peter to this, I go back here, see it's gonna be Peter, and it's gonna be the date and time that this was entered, and we can go and add somebody else, Jane. And here we go. So there it is. Now we have a web app that works. Now, if you're done with development and this is the end result of your product, what you want to make sure this is the development version that we're just refreshing and testing. Now, this is where you want to save this, go to publish, deploy as a web app, and you want to give it a new version. And you probably want to describe what this does, right? So this will be blah, blah, blah. This is my app and this does this cool things, right? Some comments about this version and what you're publishing. And you'll probably not do only myself at this point. You could just do everyone, even people who are not logged in, or you can do anyone instead. I'm just gonna leave only myself, that's fine. Just gonna update, and here it is. There is our link with our final app that we can run, and that's gonna work. So if I hit OK, let's just test it. See, the last one was Jane. Now we're gonna do Amanda. Working fine. And that should do it for this very simple web app. It should just give you an idea how this infrastructure works and how you basically go from your HTML to your script side or the other way around, right? And that should do it for this video. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.